So again, Chapter 13 starts on page 596. You notice it says handling events. Some of the stuff that's in there, those of you who were in the class last semester, you've already gone through this because we talked about how you handle events. All right, we talked about this in the past. And one of the things that the author says in here is, let's suppose that I'm not going to even create it, but let's say I have a really, really, really simple program that I create. All right? And that program has a label, it has a text box, and it has a button. And let's suppose that for the label, we put enter your name here. For the text box, you put your name, you click the button, and it shows you a message box with your name in it. Does all that make sense? All right. Now, when you do something like that, probably the only place where you'd actually put some code would be in the button. You'd probably double-click the button and either put code in the click event, or you would call something from the click event. Did you notice with the program, I think I removed it, but with the program we just looked at, it's one of the first GUI programs, I think, we've looked at this year that didn't have a button in it. All right? And I didn't realize this. I went back and looked because I found all the keys for the homework at the end of the chapter. So I went back and looked, and I gave you a wrong answer yesterday. Not on purpose. I would have gotten it wrong too. But at the end of chapter 12, in the review questions, I wouldn't take off for that, especially since I'm the one who screwed up. Question number 3 said, which of the following is most like a radio button? And I said B, check list box. That was wrong. The correct answer, according to the author, was D, button, because it is a type of button. All right, so I got it wrong. Sorry about that. But the point is, C# is an event-driven programming language. So I can write the world's most beautiful interface, but if I put no code there and I run the program, I can enter stuff, I can click buttons, I can do whatever, but nothing's going to happen. So as mentioned here on page 598, an event is a reaction to a program occurrence. And you may not have ever thought about it that way, but it's a response to something that happens to an object. So if I click a button and there's code there, that's responding to me doing something to a button object. All right? As it says, the actions that occur during the execution of a program occur at runtime. Now, the reason that that's important, and that line, the reason I brought this up, is I do want to mention this to you. So at least you've heard these terms. For several chapters, we've worked with arrays. I think everybody at least understands what an array is. All right? When we did the midterm, we introduced the topic of an array list. All right? Now, you were supposed to, at a minimum, have an array list in that midterm, actually 4 array lists. All right? But some of you used arrays also, which was fine to do. But can somebody tell me what's the difference between an array and an array list? Okay, you're right. An array is fixed in length. And the reason for that is an array is what's called an early binded object. What that means is when the program compiles, the system needs to know how much space to put aside for it. All right? So it's called early binded, so when it compiles. On the other hand, an array list is what's called late binded. It doesn't figure out its size, etc., until runtime. So it's more versatile. That should make sense to everybody. All right? So again, they talk about GUI programs are event-driven. How many times are you going to run, even that program we just looked at? It's up to you, correct? Console programs, by and large, are not event-driven. They can be. If you put something in a while loop or whatever, and you ask somebody if they want to go again, but a lot of times consoles are not. So, as it says there, programmers also like to say things like a button click, either raise an event, fire an event, or trigger an event. All right? And they show you some really simplistic examples on here. You've got a label, you've got a button, you click the button that says change the label, and the word hello becomes the word goodbye. There's nothing new there. All right? So the author says here, a method that performs a task in response to an event is known as an event handler. Now, we have looked at this before, we've talked about it, but not a lot. If you take a look up on the screen, please, anytime you've got a button, all right, it looks pretty much like that. Private void, the name of the button, underscore click, object sender, event args E, where the sender is basically what caused the button click, all right, and arguments are just things that get passed. Most everything that responds to something will look like that. Sometimes you could use the sender, sometimes you could use the E or the event args. Quite often you don't do anything with them. As it says, the object that generates the event, like the button, is known as the event sender. All right, whatever handles it is known as an event receiver. Look what they've done right here, if you would, please. When you click the change the label button, what they print out is the sender. System.windows.forms.button. Okay, that's it. That's the sender here. And again, here's another example, but they do it with a mouse event. I mentioned to you much earlier in the semester that this event args most often is used with things like mouse events. So if you're writing a game and you want to be able to position where you are on a screen, you might very well use that. All right. Now, what they mention here, again, is this important? No, but just for completeness sake, the author says if you open up your designer.cs file, what you'll notice when you work on this stuff is this is some of that code that's getting written in the background for you. So every time you've got a control and you go into the properties window and you change a property value by either adding it where there was nothing, or changing a value where there was something, or removing a value where there was something, those changes get written to this file. All right. As they mention here on the bottom of page 601, the author says here, right near the bottom, it says, connecting an event to its resulting action is called event wiring. All right? And that's writing the code for whatever event you want it to react to. All right. That's all stuff that everybody should be able to understand. Okay? Most of the rest of the chapter, all right, most of the rest of the chapter here is new stuff. The first thing they talk about here is delegates. They're going to go through some examples. I'm not going to spend much time on this. You won't be tested on it or anything else. But the idea with a delegate is while the program is running, you can take different courses of action. So for instance, let's, if you remember, at the end of the semester, typically, Shannon comes in here. In fact, what Shannon usually does is she opens up the wall and stands right in between here. And she explains everything. Why? Because when you fill out your course evaluations, I believe the course evaluation they fill out is exactly the same as the course evaluation you fill out. The only thing that's different is the class name and the instructor name. But as far as I know, everything else is the same. All right? What if it wasn't? What if we wanted to be able to set it up so that you could be running through something and you'd go down one route if you were in AWD, you'd go down the other route if you were in the hardware program. That's when you could use something like a delegate. It allows you, among other things, it's a way that you can take alternative courses of actions, but typically that are not determined until runtime. I may have even given you this example before. I'm dating myself with this movie. But did anybody ever see the movie with Tom Hanks? It's quite a few years old now, called Big. You ever see that movie? Okay. If you remember, after he turned big, didn't he get a job with like an advertising agency or something like that where he wanted to write an interactive comic book? It's basically what it was. I'm paraphrasing. Okay, toy company. But that's kind of what he wanted to do. So the idea was you could go through it and have different courses of action based on that. That's pretty much what we're talking about doing right here. And what does that do? That brings the person running the program into the equation because she or he could change things based on the results they gave to questions. All right? And it doesn't really sound that different when we talked about it in JavaScript, and we didn't spend much time on it, but we did talk about it using things like cookies. All right? If I go into my Amazon account right now, if I had anything, let's just say I went in there and a week ago, I didn't do this, but let's say that a week ago, I went in there and I bought a book on C#. I can almost bet you that down toward the bottom of my Amazon account, it would show me similar books to the one I bought. Now, those books wouldn't be shown there if I hadn't bought a book on C#. If I buy a book on Java, it's not going to show me a bunch of books on C#. All right, so again, it's the kind of thing that as you're doing something, it allows you to make changes, make updates, make deletions, whatever. So this is the syntax for it. It's the word delegate, the return type, the name of the delegate, and then anything that's passed into it. And again, I'm not saying is this going to make sense to you or not, but I just want to run over it again for completeness sake. All right? When we go over Chapter 14 tomorrow, they talk about files. You all know what a file is, right? You sit there and you save your test when you're working on your test. You put it in a folder, right? And that folder is full of files, correct? All right. Well, that's one way to make data persist is to put them in files. The other way is to put it in a database, and that's what we'll start on next week. All right. So if you look right here, notice what they have. They come in here and they say, I've got a delegate that's called greeting handler. What does it mean? Not much, but there's a delegate called greeting handler. And they set it up equal to both of these, first del and second del. First del is going to end up saying hello. Second del is going to end up saying goodbye. So if we run this, what should happen here is it should say hello, Kathy, and goodbye, Bob. Does that make sense? All right. And when you look at the output, it's what it is. Now, the examples that they're giving in here are stupid examples. It's not, why would you do that? But they just want to show you with fairly simplistic examples what's happening. All right. You can combine delegates. When you combine delegates, you typically say, just use a plus sign. Now, why does that matter? Well, look, again, please look on here. They again create a delegate at the top. Then they've got a hello and a goodbye. All right? Then they say, right here, if we just did this, first del would be hello, second del would be goodbye, but then notice they combine them. First del plus equals second del. And then they call it with Kathy. This should say hello, Kathy, goodbye, Kathy. And then second L should say, goodbye, Bob. So it's combining two different things for one person and only one for the next one. And there you got it. So the idea behind what's in the end of this book is it's really extending what the language does. All right, these are very programmatic chapters. So if you want to add stuff, as I said, that typically you weren't able to do, you'd be able to do it with some of this. If you do have any interest in it, if you look, there is a delegate example on the bottom of 606, and it goes on pretty long. 607, 608, 609, and 610. All right? All right. So, you declaring and using both custom and built-in event handlers. What does that mean? That means if you don't like the way that an event handler handles something, you can write your own. Why would that be important? All right. Would you agree? We've written programs kind of like this. I'm just going to put something quick on the board. We've written programs like this, where it might say miles driven, gallons used. There's a text box and there's a text box. There's something here that says MPG. There's a button here that says calculate. Maybe another one that says exit. All right, you put in 400 here, you put in 25 here, you click that button, it says 16. That makes sense? All right, we also learned that when you do that, and you come in here and you leave one blank, we've learned with either like try parse or whatever, how to handle that. What if you don't want to do that? In other words, what if I want to set this up so that if in this text box I type in anything that's not numeric, it just doesn't accept it. You understand what I'm saying? So if I tried typing hello in there, it wouldn't take it. I can write my own custom event handler to handle that. I can say check every single thing that's being entered, and if it's not either a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or a decimal point and only allow one, don't accept it. All right? That's what they talk about, what you're able to do in this section. All right? And they do this thing with GPAs. I'm not going to go through any of it. So there is a built-in event handler for virtually everything that you do. Virtually everything. But you can override, typically, that event handler. All right? And again, if we turn up to page 617 on 617, 18, 19, and 20, there is another you do it. And it's you create a bank account class. All right? So if you wanted to see some more stuff, you wanted to extend, so to speak, some of the stuff we even did for our bank account, you could take a look at this. Next, turning up to page 621. I know this is, some of you wrote down on your evals, and I honestly appreciate every comment, whether they were positive or negative. I really and truly did. But some of you wrote down, these lectures are pretty boring. Yeah, they are. And I'm not saying they're not. All right, I've tried teaching this in a bunch of different ways. All right, and I may go back and teach it the next time differently than I did this time. I don't know. All right, but yeah, the stuff here isn't real exciting. All right, if you talk to the people who are the fourth semester people right now, they kind of like the stuff we're doing because every time we do something, we're building an Android app that does it. All right. But with a lot of the stuff that we do in here, yeah, I could sit there and, we could build a simple payroll system And every time we go to a new chapter, we could just add stuff and add stuff and add stuff to that. I've done that in the past. And people either say, this is really good, it really helped, I really understood it. And other people write down, I'm so frickin' sick and tired of talking about a payroll system. So there's really no way to win. All right. So on page 621, they talk about handling control component events. All right. It says handling events requires understanding several different concepts. It says, fortunately, most of the time, you'll want to handle events, kind of typical types of events. In other words, button clicks for button events. But when you look at this, there's a lot of other ones. And these are some of them here on page 621, and there's more on 622. And I'm going to ask this question, again, I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence here, but does it make sense to everybody if I come through here and say new project, Windows Form, and I put this in here? Again, this is going to be real simple. So it comes up, I go over to my toolbox here, and I just put in a button. All right, make it nice and big so everybody can see it. So I've got this button right here. All right. You know already that if we come over here, we can set any properties, color, font, etc. That doesn't matter. But when I come over here and click that lightning bolt, right there, those are all of the different events that the button can react to. All right. So you'll notice, for example, there's a click. We go down a little further, you'll look and you might say, wow, you know, there's a click here, and there's no double click. All right. Microsoft used to actually have a double click for a button, but what a lot of people would do is they'd write code under the double click event. So somebody'd run the program. All right. And it would say, you know, like, click this button. So they'd run it, and they'd click it, and nothing would happen. And they'd keep clicking on it, and they'd get real frustrated, and eventually they'd accidentally double-click on it, and something would happen. Then they weren't sure what they did. And it was like, so they start clicking on it again, and now it's not working. All right? And a while back, they just decided to drop support for buttons, at least, for that. But again, if you notice in here, I don't know how many events there are. I don't care. But if I come in here then and I put in a text box, you'll notice that it has a lot of events too. Some of these are the same, some of these are different. And if I highlight both of them, now it's only going to show me the events that both of them have in common. All right? Turning up all the way to page 625 here. And again, we've talked about this a little bit before, in fact, 626. Handling mouse and keyboard events. Okay? Does everybody get this? That if I go back to this program right here, okay, I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to click. Oops, I'm going to go back to here. And I'm going to click the, if I can find it. That if I go to here and I run this program, okay, so I come in and I run this program right now. And I come in here and I put in my name. All right. Again, I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. Does everyone understand that the computer is not accepting that as JEFF? It's a series of zeros and ones. The series of zeros and ones that represent a J, the series of zeros and ones that represented E, etc. The reason I'm telling you that is something has got to happen between the time I'm entering my name and the time it comes out in here that the computer can understand it. All right? So again, who cares? There are keyboard events that are going on when I'm doing this. All right? And at least some of the events that are in here for this text box, directly or indirectly, are keyboard events. So again, I can put code in there to make sure something does or does not happen if I don't want to allow it to happen. And that's what they're talking about in here. That's the keyboard stuff. Now, with the mouse stuff, all right, this isn't that different, again, than some of the stuff we talked about last semester with JavaScript. For instance, with a mouse enter and a mouse leave. If I take my mouse and when the program's running, if I want to take my mouse and put it into a text box, for example, all right, I could change the color of the text box. And then when I pull it out again with the mouse leave, I could make it go back to its original color. And that's what they're talking about in here. So the mouse events are 626, 627, and 628, and the keyboard events are 628, 629, and 630. All right. All right. Managing multiple controls. Here's a question, not meant to confuse you, and I think everybody knows it already. How many controls can have the focus at any one time in a running program? One. All right. You can have multiple controls, but only one of them can have the focus at any one time. There's a lot of different ways. We've talked about this before. One of the reasons that I showed you very early on in the semester, if you look up again on the screen here, this is really simple. But if I go over to View Tab Order, and I set that to 0 and that to 1, I can be sure that when I run the program, my cursor is going to be in there. Does that make sense? That's the way most people set up the focus. If you don't want to do that, you can also do it programmatically. All right, there's a tab order property that you can use to set it that way too. And then finally, because we are just about finished here, turning up to the bottom of page 633, the author says, continue to learn about controls and events. If you decide that what you'd like to be involved in once you graduate from here is, yeah, I'd really kind of like to be a C# programmer. There are places around here, all right? I don't know of that many, to be honest with you, but there are places around here because they're the ones who wanted us to have C# as part of the curriculum. All right? But the best way to learn is, they say, is to use the inside help. Hopefully I've mentioned this to you. If I haven't, then I'm really dumber than I even think I am. And that is that if I go back in here, I'm going to get rid of that tab order stuff that's in there. All right. But if I click on a button and I want to know more about the button, I can hit my F1 function key, and it brings up the help. When you came in and you set up Visual Studio, you set up the help stuff automatically. You can do that where you set it up, where you install Visual Studio and don't have the help stuff in there. All right? And why would people do that? Because this is taking up some room on your hard drive. Finally, the last thing is there's one more of these you do it's. On pages 634, 635, and 636. Not very cool or whatever. They just have you play with tab order and a few other things in it. All right? And that's it.